Hey guys, welcome back to take two of this episode of Lone Star State. Let's cross our fingers and hope the internet works a little better and our connection stays somewhat okay. Um, Please let me know in the chat over here if you're still having problems because we might just have to bail on this completely. You guys, I don't know. I don't know. I don't control the internet. Um, I'm also very bad at this, so I'm probably doing something incredibly wrong. Um, hi, we'll do a quick brief intro again, and then we'll just jump into the show. My name's Joe Starr. I'm one of the writers of Honest Trailers over at Screen Junkies, and um, I started doing these weekly streams on the weekends during the good old self isolation period of the coronavirus, so that I don't go insane. Um, so we've been doing a lot of fun, geeky stuff on this channel that I wouldn't necessarily get to do at my day to day, painting Warhammer and doing D&D stuff. What we're going to do today is we're going to pick up from last week. Last week we started me and the chat collaborating and building a new D&D city for for you guys to use, pointing at chat, for me to use. I think, uh, we talked about it a little bit last week, but I think there's the amount of like lore and information and stuff that comes with Dungeons and Dragons can sometimes be a little overwhelming. And so I think the idea of creating um, a new city and having a part in like building from scratch, maybe makes you more comfortable with the idea of like jumping in and trying the game because you know the place because you built it. Thank you guys for watching and jumping back in. Sorry again about my streaming issues. Thank you for hitting the like button and the bell and the subscribe. Please do hit those things. Obviously this channel is just kind of for fun, but obviously there's the vain part of me that helps it like just like blows up huge. But also, we're building a cool city together, and I hope people see it, and I hope people get interested in using it. And if you do use it, hit me on Twitter. Talk to me about what you're doing with it in the comments. I think that's so cool. I think the shared storytelling experience of something like this, where all of us can tell a completely different story in the same place, is really, really cool. And so I want to know about it. And also, again, I apologize. You're just joining us, and my voice keeps going out. And you're like, "What's wrong with that dude?" It's because yesterday I did a Cobra Commander voice for 30 minutes on air, and my vocal cords are very mad at me. So bear with me. And then, yeah, before we jump in, the other cool thing is that tomorrow on this stream, I'm going to do an adventure in the city that we are building, a one-on-one D&D session with my friend Erica Ishii. She's one of my oldest friends here. You guys know her from Geek and Sundry and LA by Night, the Vampire the Masquerade show. And she's doing voice acting all over the place. She's amazing and wonderful, and I'm super excited about it. We made her character yesterday. I think you guys are really going to have fun with it. We're going to jump back in to building this city together. To do that, we're using this cool questionnaire form that a YouTuber named Matthew Koval made. I have a link to his channel in the description of this video and of last week's video. I also have last week's video in the description. So you should watch it and see what we've been doing and sort of see the beginning of the city that we've been building. And then also, subscribe to Matthew. I think he does really cool stuff. He created this like basically questionnaire. It's like 20, 30 questions to answer. And then suddenly, voila, you have a cool town that you yourself have created in D&D. It's just this fun, really handy guide to being creative. So last week, we started creating this town that you guys named New Vandir Mosguul. It's kind of like Edinburgh, medieval Edinburgh meets like a very rainy Seattle. It's right on a loch. It's a very gloomy, rainy, dreary place. There's very rarely ever sunlight to the point that if there is, there's a lot of superstition around sunny days. People don't go outside, boats don't go out, that kind of thing. There's a very intense uh, uh, class system here. And I'm not going to jump in and read the entire like summary of what we've done. Uh, Once we have all this together, I am going to share the city as one document that I'll make public, and you guys can use it. Um, but just for time's sake, and since this is take two of the video, I'm not going to read through the entire summary. But the big bullet points are um, that there's a very interesting class system in the city that you guys have created. And that is because a couple hundred years ago, there was a city that was just called Vandir Mosguul. Um, the elves ran it. They were real shitty. They were really crappy to everyone. The underclass was largely dragonborn and tieflings, and they were looked down upon and sort of spat on and despised. Um, while the elves sort of got rich and fat and just sort of treated everybody like crap. There was some kind of cataclysm. We don't know what exactly. That city literally fell into the lake, into the loch. So the ruins of the old city are in the loch. New Vandir Moscow was built at the edge by that underclass, that at the time underclass, the Dragonborn, the Tieflings. Cut to a couple hundred years later, and they are now at the top. They haven't learned any lessons from the past, and now there's a new, class system there, where Dragonborn and Tiefling are all these sort of noble, crappy families. There's a lot of humans and halflings and stuff sort of struggling, in the middle in the blue collar, and then there's sort of these lower class dregs. And then there's also a colony of mer people called Tritons that live in the loch, and they trade relics from the old city. They're huge status symbols and very popular with the rich. So let's jump back into to building this place together. Well, actually, let me first check in with chat. Myra says, if a person wants to get started into D&D, what should they buy? That's a good question. I think you should get. I think it's the Player's Guide. The Player's Guide is the one book with all the rules and everything you actually need to know how to play. If you don't want to get a book, I think you can just get a basic subscription on D&D Beyond, and they'll unlock a tier of digital books for you, and they also have a lot of online cool tools to play. Full disclosure, the company I work for also owns them, so I guess hashtag ad in a way. But even before I was working with them, I still really like that service. But the Player's Guide is really all you need, and some dice. And then there's lots of books that expand worlds and do cities and stuff like that if you want stuff like that. Or you can just use the one we're building right here. Eric says, would all the ranked clouds make it an ideal place for vampires and other creatures that avoid sunlight, like D&D Forks, Washington, but way more interesting? It absolutely could be, actually. I think that's a really cool point. As I pick up my notebook to start taking notes from what you guys talk about, I'm just going to write vampires, question mark. Christine McGee says, I want sparkling goblins. Oh, sparkling vampire goblins, I think, would be very good. Brandon Sloan says, is this a place that gets a good amount of people passing through, or is it kind of isolated? I think it has like a decent amount of folks coming through. Definitely not elves, except for wood elves. You guys decided that they're okay with wood elves for some reason. I don't know. Racism's weird and it doesn't have to make sense, right? Yay. So probably not elves, because they are just outright not liked in this place. But it's a city of like 8,000, so there's probably a strong import-export trade. And they definitely do a lot of exporting of fish, because fishing is a heavy industry. The dwarves in this area, instead of being miners and craftsmen and stuff like that, the dwarves are all fisher people. So they build boats and mend boats and stuff like that. So I assume that's probably a big business for them as well. So yeah, I think primary exports, probably fish. Probably mostly fish. Fish and boats. I kind of like the idea that these dwarves are building boats and then they're getting put on wagons and shipped out. So that said, let me pull the form back up. Our questionnaire. And by bring it up, I mean re-sign into Adobe Acrobat because it's signed out. Oh gosh. Okay. And it's still signing out. 1 second. This is very exciting content, you guys. I apologize. You guys want to watch me just try and just get angry at Adobe in real time? It's happening. Um, okay, here we go. Yay. So we've talked about the government of this town. There's a marquis um, uh, who is obviously of a noble house. There's a parliament of 9, I've called it. But then there's also an organization that you guys named the Buttercrump Mercantiles, and that's sort of folks representing merchants and the blue collar folk and stuff like that. And so these groups are in constant kind of in sort of like a quiet power struggle all the time. So let's jump into this, you guys. Let's do a little warm up, um, and let's create a store. We'll start off kind of simple because right after this, we're going to get into local religion. And I don't feel like just jumping right into it cold. We need to warm up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So Bradley says there should be a tale of an impossible to catch fish, which our monster hunter that is at the body flamingo would probably know about. Impossible to catch fish. I'm writing it down. Okay, so we're going to create um, uh, a store at the Royal Thoroughfare, which is like the big official outdoor market in the city. I think, yeah, you guys, it's on a city that you guys named Trout Street. Um, I've decided in my head canon that Trout Street was basically the main street of the slums in the old city, and that when New Vandir Mosguul was created, they made a new Trout Street that's like the big main street of the city. So I think there's kind of a fun irony there that they've literally forgotten where they came from as they walk this street and spend their money and act like jerks. Um, so okay, so let's create this store. Um, let's do simple stuff like what kind of store is it? Is it magical item store? Is it a weapon store? Um, is it just like a dry goods place? Hey Jack, good to see you too, man. Let's talk about gentrified Trout Street, Canadian Cat Dad. Exactly, it is absolutely a gentrified Trout Street. Um, so let's talk about this store. You guys throw me out some ideas, and just like last week, we will sort of get this stuff figured out and put together. Christopher says, I do feel like fishing equipment is probably the most important. And I think that sort of combines with Christy McGee saying nautical accessories. So I agree with that. So we're going to create this store, and it's fishing nautical supply. So based on what we already know about the story, the fishing is mostly done by dwarves. So I'm going to assume that this store is owned by a dwarf. I think that's pretty straightforward and safe to say. So dwarf owner. So tell me about this dwarf owner. Tell me about the dwarf that runs this store a little bit. Are they young? Are they old? Are they gruff? Are they kind? Um, Tell me about them a little bit. What are they like? What are they scared of? Are they super nervous and anxious? Are they quick to anger? Or are they just like super chill? Is it like the dude of dwarves? I want to know. All right, Chrissy says it's a salty old lady dwarf owns this place. Salty old lady dwarf. And she tells everyone the tale of the impossible to catch fish. Eugene asks, how big is the city again? It's about 8,000 people. So it's pretty big. It's pretty decent sized. Eric says a young dwarf runs it for his infirm father. So let's combine some of these ideas a little bit. So we have this old salty sea dog of a lady dwarf. She's a little a-happy. She's a little a-happy. Um, Maybe an accident prevented her from going on the water again. So she's landlocked basically, and she's constantly like, "Oh, that fish is out there," and she's kind of mean and bitter because of it. Um, she's also, because of that injury, a little infirm, like Eric is suggesting in the chat. And so a young dwarf, her, let's say her, just to really drive it home that she's a salty old sea dog of a lady dwarf. Uh, Instead of just his mother, it's his grandmother. So grandson helps run the store. That is cool. And yeah, that's a big family. A name for the store, the Ladies Line. Ooh, Anderson Council. That's really good. The Ladies Line is a great name for a fishing store. See, this is what I love about stuff like this, is because, especially in Dungeon Dragon, especially a store that just sells like fishing equipment, like when is that place ever going to actually get like a lot of love or a lot of interesting detail? The weapon store probably sure does. That place is probably owned by a crazy person who, like, you have their whole background. But suddenly we have this weird, crazy store. Um, that at first glance is a fishing equipment store, but just with like a couple of details, you guys have made it really rich and weird, and all sorts of weird adventures and storylines can take place coming out of this place, which is really, really cool. So James Strong says, "Well, last time I was here was only a mausoleum and a pub. I missed a fair bit." You did, James. You did. We came up with some really cool stuff. So after this live stream, watch the rest of the last one. It's really cool. And again, once we sort of have all this together and we keep adding as we add details, I'm going to make a public Google Doc that I'll have shared in the description of these videos that you guys have access to, that you can use if you so choose. And I just rhymed. Boom. Okay. Kareen says she's kind to small children. She has a soft spot for small children. Soft spot for small children. I like that detail. That is really fun. At the Ladies Line. Christopher says the name of the store is the Ladies Line. Christina says, "I'm from a country far, far away. Literally have no idea what you guys are talking about, but your voice is very soothing, so thanks." I do what I can. I think I have a very grating and very sort of like obnoxious Revenge of the Nerds kind of voice, but if it works for you, it works for you. Um, Glad to be of service. Um, so, um, Okay, so Jack says the character could be tasked with an adventure to kill the sea beast that the old woman served. Yeah, exactly. The big fish that injured her. Her big fish story. This would give them a reason to see the location firsthand. Exactly. That's a great quest starter. I think that's so fun. It's such a cool idea. All right, so we've created the store, the Ladies Line. It's a fishing store and a nautical supply store. It's owned by this salty old lady dwarf. She's very a-happy. She has a huge, like, big fish story. There's some kind of beast that lives in the lock. No one really believes her, but she knows it's there because it is responsible for the injury that now has her landlocked, which means she can't fish anymore. She can't boat. Those were her loves. Her grandson helps her in the store. She has a soft spot for small children. I think that's really, really cool. Exactly, Jack. She's like maimed. Like, yeah, there's an injury. Oh man, I love this. Yeah, everybody on the same page. It is fun. Cool. All right, we've created a store. Let's get into some weird stuff. Who is? Let's do this. Let's come up with some weird stuff. Hey, you guys want to talk about religion? That's fun. Let's talk about religions in the city. So this stuff can be fun in, like, again, everything is going to be in service of a story at some point. And I think some cool ideas can come out of these, like, big discussions in here. Now, the place doesn't have to have necessarily like a big single combined like religion. The place itself can be probably pretty agnostic, right? And there can be all sorts of little religious sects going on, or there can be a massive, like, mono, uh, uh, sort of religious blah, 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 blah. I don't know. Let's jump into it. Let's find out. Canadian Cat Dad asks, are there standard pre-existing D&D religions? There are. There's lots of different pantheons of gods in Dungeons and Dragons and things like that that do exist, and they can easily exist here, right? So if you are a player and you're like, oh, well, I already like X, Y, and Z, when you mess with this, you can totally just use those gods. The interesting thing to me about religion, especially with pantheons and stuff like that, is there's so many similarities and parallels, right? So if this place, because of all the rain, uh, has its own specific, god based on all the rain, or like a god of economic justice or something like that, because of the background of the city, because of the uprising of the people. Um, Maybe because this place is a little off the beaten path. Uh, they have their version of a god that can easily be based on one of the pre-existing gods for like the rest of the continent, the rest of the country, um, wherever and whenever you want to set this city. Because one thing I don't like doing in D&D, because it's overwhelming to me, it's just a personal thing, is I have a really hard time like actually connecting um, cities and stuff to a certain place or time in D&D lore, because there's so much. There's so much. So I kind of keep things sort of like independent and suggestive, and things like that. So let's take a look at all here. Perhaps the elves. So Anderson says, let me check in with chat. Anderson says, perhaps the elves had a law worshiping of one god. I dig that. So what if, excuse me. Okay, so what if, let's mess with that idea for a second, and then I'll jump back into chat. So the elves enforced, back in the old city, elves enforced a specific religion. So obviously, like that religion would now be like kind of probably torn down, right? And what could be like an interesting use for something like that now? Because it probably still floats up somewhere. Maybe some people still kind of like quietly practice it. It's still quietly practiced. Maybe even some people use it as an act of rebellion against these new noble houses, like the ultimate irony that they're using this old religion of their oppressors as a symbol against these new oppressors. Could be kind of interesting, right? So, let's go through the chat. Something like a Mayan agricultural pantheon. I like that. Kareen says, so let's talk. Yeah, so there's definitely an agricultural god, or even like a series of them. Because this is, a smaller, kind of isolated town. It's not like no one ever goes. It's not like a locked up cult or anything like that. But I like the idea that because it's isolated, yeah, they probably have tons of weird beliefs and stuff. There's probably like 15 agricultural gods. I think stuff like that can be really, really interesting. Bradley says there's a secret cult of the fish beast of the loch. They make weird offerings to the fish beast. All right, so there's a beast in the loch, and some people worship the beast in the loch. Maybe the fisher people worship the beast in the loch. That could be kind of cool and interesting, right? I kind of dig that idea. I love the idea that a religion that has its own fighting style, that its monks adopt. That is cool. Let's figure out. Let's let's do a couple little categories. So here's some very simple questions to ask, and then we can sort of fill in some of these ideas that we're coming up with some of these specific questions. So, who is the god of knowledge in this city? Who's the god of knowledge? What's their name? We can start with a cool name. God of knowledge. And again, if you're just joining us, thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thanks for hitting the thumbs up button and hitting the bell and all that stuff, and just spending your time here with me. Hope you guys are staying safe and keeping your hands washed, and taking care of yourselves. It's a weird time, so make sure you are taking care of yourself. Um, DC says to Zinc because DC plays Warhammer. Let's go, just to avoid IP. Let's go. Christopher suggests Biblios. I dig Biblios because bibliography, because books. I like that. So Biblios, the god of knowledge. Um, so what's some interesting characteristics of Biblios, the god of knowledge? How about this? Let's do weird physical characteristics, right? Just like old gods in our world maybe had some bizarre, hey, this weird Greek god had 3 feet, and just weird shit like that, right? Um, so what are a couple weird characteristics about Biblios? Um, he's a hoarder of knowledge. Okay, that's cool. He doesn't like to share it. That's kind of fun. Hoarder of knowledge. That is very cool. Um, he's a trioculus. He has 3 eyes. Great. Perfect. I always love a good trioculus. He has a ton of hands. And all of his hands come together to form a. That's so gross. All of his hands, Jack Shipley says, all of his hands come together to form a book you can read. That's so weird and gross. I love that visual. That's great. Form a book you can read. He has 7. Oh, okay. He has 7 cats to do his bidding. Maybe his 7 cats go out and they collect knowledge. So we have Biblios, the god of knowledge. I think that is kind of fun. He also has enormous glasses, and he can see everything. Ooh, that's fun. Enormous glasses. I think that's good on Biblios. So you have Biblios, he's a hoarder of knowledge. He's a trioculus. He has tons of hands, which form books, because that's creepy. He has 7 cats that go out and collect knowledge for him. And he has enormous glasses that can see anything. Cool. And also, yeah, he's a cat dude. Good for him. Good for him. So let me ask you guys this: Who is? So we have a god. We have a god. We have some sort of ideas for other ones that I think are really interesting. And here's what I sort of want to figure out before we go on this one. And I apologize. This will be kind of a shorter episode, but we lost some time with that stream restart and all that stuff. But tomorrow will be super fun because again, Erica Ishii is going to be here, and we're going to play a game set in the city, which I think will be very, very fun and very cool. But here's what I want to do to close out. So we know a lot about some of the religions now and some of the gods. We need some folks that know about them. Who is the big religious leader in town, like the sort of main source of all religious knowledge in the city? My thought instantly is that would probably be a dragonborn or a tiefling because they're in charge, they're at the top of the food chain, and so the person sort of that sort of lords over all the religious stuff in town would probably also be a dragonborn or a tiefling. Christy says they're called the librarian. I like that. The high librarian. Let's combine Christy and Jack's ideas. The high librarian. You know what? Okay, hang on. High librarian. This is interesting. So I was like, okay, it's probably definitely like a dragonborn. But then DC was like, what if it's a gnome? And I don't know why it's a gnome yet. I don't, but it is. The high librarian is a gnome, and they I don't know why yet. It's a gnome named Marine, who Drew says Marine, the High Librarian, who's a gnome. It's got to be a gnome. That's good. Um, okay, cool. Yeah, we've got Marine, the High Librarian, who is a gnome. Guys, I think that sounds super fun. She stands on books so that people can see her because she's very tiny. And I think that's a really good place to stop today with Marine. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to stream with Erica Ishii. We're going to have just a one-on-one game of D&D set in the city. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with me today so that I can sort of shout in the void and just have something to occupy my gourd during all this nonsense. Generally, thank you guys. And please take care of yourselves. Make sure you're practicing self-care. Um, really pay close attention to that. If you're not being super productive or getting real prison swole or whatever, let it go. Just be nice to yourselves, be nice to each other, and see you tomorrow. Bye, guys. If I can stop the stream, I'll actually leave. That is the song that ends my show. Bye, guys.